A very special welcome to all of our listeners, tens of thousands across the state of Israel and our Jewish communities all over the world, to the second part of the series on who's who in the Israeli political system, the impending elections coming up in the very near future. We have had remarkable feedback from our communities around Israel and all around the world, for us at World Mizrachi, who are hosting this event. The feedback has been remarkable. The opportunity to hear last week so many of the party leaders vying for your vote, why you should vote for them, and bringing their vision for the future of Israeli society and indeed the state of Israel to English-speaking electorate in Israel and, of course, English-speaking communities around the world. And welcome, all of you, to the second part, as the elections approach, of hearing from religious Zionist leaders within these parties why specifically the religious Zionist community and members of this community should vote for each particular party. We know that the spectrum of religious Zionists in Israel can be anything up to around 20% of the electorate, depending how one sees it. A large and significant community involved in so many elements of Israeli society and Jewish life. And we are indeed privileged to be joined by so many of the finest sons and daughters of the religious Zionist movement and those representing the religious Zionist movement and religious Zionist values in different parties. And therefore, we thought it important to be able to engage with these thinkers, these political leaders, why it is that you should vote for them. So we begin with Dani Dayan from the New Hope Party, Tikva Hadasha. Dani, who was the previous Consul General of Israel in New York, previous head of the Judea and Samaria Council, and is on the list of MKs for the new Tikva Hadasha Party. New Hope, we hand over to you, Dani, and the question that I'm going to be asking you, and indeed each and every one of the participants, question number one, in the next 3 or 4 minutes, why should somebody who identifies as a religious Zionist vote for your party? Dani, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Perez, and let me start at this customary B'Sheva Chachsaniya. I want to tell you that in my 4 years as Consul General in New York, whenever any issue that concerned Israel arose, I had to invest quite an effort to bring support from other sides of the Jewish community, and that is an understatement, never with Mizrachi. Mizrachi was always asking, what can we do for Israel? What can we do to support Israel in these or those circumstances? And thank you so much for that. It definitely made my life easier in New York. Now to the point. I am the only participant here, at least at this point, that is not a religious Zionist. I am a staunch Zionist. Probably, I would say, I sometimes joke that probably Zionist is my religion. In that respect, I am a religious Zionist. However, to be in a framework, to be in an organization, whether in my personal life, on political life, on ideological life, that is shared by religious Zionists and non-religious Zionists, is one of the strongest beliefs of my life, and it's also a belief of New Hope. We believe that is the right way to do things. I will tell you something very personal. When my wife Einat and I decided to move from Tel Aviv, from the comfort of Tel Aviv to central Samaria, to Ma'ale Shomron, for purely ideological reasons during the first Intifada, we doubted whether to go to reside in Barkan or in Ma'ale Shomron. And the only reason, basically, that we decided for Ma'ale Shomron is that Barkan, at least at that point, was an exclusively secular community, and the Ma'ale Shomron was, by purpose, ideologically, a mixed one, in which we wanted to raise our family in a community that in which the entire Am Israel resides. Also in my political life, the only party in which I was really active was the now defunct Atid. Atid has had two main mottos. The first one was loyalty to Eretz Israel, Ne'emanei Eretz Israel, but the second one, it was no less important than that, was Olchim Beyachad. We marched together, we walked together. Professor Yuval Ne'eman, the late Professor Yuval Ne'eman that came from labor, the late Geula Cohen that came from Herut, what we call the Machane Leumi, and others from the Religious Zionist Party. At the head of them, the only person that I still call Mori Rabbi, Ibadel Chaim Arukim, Rav Elazar Waldman. He also conducted my wedding. I see that as an ideology. I see as an ideology to eliminate that barrier that creates secluded communities on one side, but also forms secluded political parties on both sides of that barrier. We came here to shatter that barrier, and as long as you are fully committed to the needs of religious Zionism, among the needs of Kol Tzorchei Amcha Israel, as part of Kol Tzorchei Amcha Israel, if you understand that those needs, that the Zionist religious education is vitally important to the future of the state of Israel, that many of the religious Zionist needs and values are vitally important to the state of Israel, and you have a strong representation also of Zionist, religious Zionism in your list, in your party. I think that is milchatchila, a priori, that is the desirable format of a political party, and a party of that kind that doesn't seclude itself besides barriers and walls of do you wear a kippah and what kind of kippah do you wear, is the party that can advance also the values of religious Zionism better. The years I was chairman of Yesh Council, Moetzet Yesh, and in my board, a vast majority of the participants were religious Zionists. We made together a point in bringing to all the entire Am Israel to see Yehuda Shomron, to see Judea and Samaria. There is always the danger that in leadership that you go too far with your positions, and then when you turn your head, you see that you have no one behind you. That is the right formula, in my view, to advance the needs of Am Israel, including the needs of religious Zionism. And we are extremely aware of those needs. By the way, the head of our party, our candidate for Prime Minister, Gidon Saar, is himself Shomer Shabbat. And if you want to do good for Am Israel, not just for one sector of Am Israel, then New Hope offers you, a vote for New Hope offers you exactly that, together with healing the society. We came here to heal a badly broken Israeli society, and that's, in my understanding, exactly what Rav Kook taught us all we have to do.
Thank you very much, Dani. Enlightening words, deeply appreciated. Before I call on Rabbi Yehuda Glick, I just want to say a very special thank you to Gil Hoffman, who is a member of our Mizrachi Speakers Bureau and talks on our behalf around the world, the chief political correspondent of the Jerusalem Post, for organizing on our behalf last week's event and this week's event. We greatly appreciate your efforts, Gil, and our educational director, Rabbi Ruvain Terrigan, here at World Mizrachi, and the entire Mizrachi programming team for the role that they have played. Thank you. Yehuda Glick, you are a previous member of Parliament of the Likud, once again running on the list of the Likud, a person who's dedicated so many years of your life to the importance of the Temple Mount, to Har HaBayit, in a me'ir panim way, which really engages and brings people in a unifying way. And you are once again running on the Likud list. Rabbi Yehuda, why is it that religious Zionists should vote for the Likud?
Shalom, my dear friend, Rav Doron. It's really an honor always to speak here on behalf of Mizrachi. You're doing so many great things, and I again and again feel honored to have the opportunity to speak on your stage. At the same time, I also want to send warm embracement to my dear friends, Dani, Dayan, Simcha Rothman, Elazar Stern, and soon coming Ayelet Shaked. I really would have loved to be in a party where each one of, well, if I would be able to vote in the elections to all four of these people, they're such wonderful people, every single one of them. They're so wonderful. And before I directly answer your question, I really want to share some thoughts that I think connect to what Dani spoke about a few seconds ago. I think everybody who recognizes the Israeli society, we feel that the art of civil disagreement is on the wane. Civil discourse gives way to shaming and shunning. Often this is infused with zealous self-righteousness. Adopting such a posture allows people to label others not only as contraries, but sometimes as fools or other appellations I prefer not to repeat. And this justifies abandonment of civility. In the past 2 years, we have gone through 4 elections. Every one of them was on the topic of Yesh banning Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as if he was Satan himself. This has not only failed again and again, but it's leading to a kind of anarchy. Look, let us face the facts. According to the polls, right now, there are 2 options. Either Netanyahu will be the next prime minister, or we will be going back to instability and to, again, another election. I don't think Prime Minister Netanyahu is the Messiah. I don't think he's perfect. In spite of the vaccinations, in spite of the major peace processes that he brought together with the Abraham Accords that he has promoted. But I do believe that 5th elections will be really just too much. We need stability. The Likud is a diverse party. Yes, we have people of all kinds, some religious, some traditional, some secular, but the idea that we work together in spite of the differences, reaching out with goodwill. Let's put all the other issues aside and care for this country. We need it. Am Yisrael deserves it. And now when I refer specifically to the religious Zionism, the religious Zionism has really managed to put itself in the center today in Israel, in the academic world, in the spiritual leadership, in military, in media, in the science, in economy, in high tech, wherever you put it. Why in politics do we have to stick to a specific marginal party? It's not good for what I understand as religious Zionism. And I think that what Dani spoke before, Rav Kook, seeing the leadership, the Zionist movement, the religious Zionist movement spread around in all the different aspects of life, but working together is so important that I really hope we will be able to do that under continuing leadership of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Thank you, Rav Yehuda, for those enlightening words. We move on to Simcha Rothman, a new face in Israeli political discourse representing the Religious Zionist Party. And also Simcha has been a person who's a real activist, founder of the movement of government and governability and democracy, a person who has worked in Labour's tremendously for many years in terms of separation of powers and regarding judicial activism, and he is representing the Religious Zionist Party. Indeed, it's the only party which its name is Religious Zionist. Simcha, why should religious Zionists in Israel vote for the Religious Zionist Party?
Okay, so first I also have to say that I basically owe my life to the Religious Zionist Institute and across the globe, because my wife's grandfather was in Bnei Akiva in South Africa, and he came to Israel at a very young age because of this activity. And my wife's grandmother was active in Bnei Akiva in Chicago area, and she came to Israel also, and they met here. So, and then they moved back to the U.S., and all their children were in Bnei Akiva and made Aliyah. And so the connection with the activity of World Mizrachi, World Bnei Akiva, and in Israel and in the U.S. and in South Africa and in around the world, basically what brought my family, my personal family, together. So thank you for that. But besides that, as you mentioned, the only party which is its name is the Religious Zionist. party is our party, and you have, as you can see, many people that are part of the social group of religious Zionists. Some of them might send their kids to the same institute as myself or as other members of my party. Some of them might share parts or even big parts of the ideology. And I'm not sure I'll have a lot of arguments with some of the people in other parties on religious Zionist ideas. But in politics, what matters is what is on the top of your agenda. What is the most important value? What is your reason of existence? And the reason of existence for the Religious Zionist Party is the Religious Zionist group. It's the Religious Zionist sociological group and institutions and all the tremendous work that all those organizations and people are doing. I myself acted, as you mentioned, for 8 years in an organization that worked with all parties. And I don't think that the justice system in issue is just for one group of people to deal with. But when I looked around and I looked at myself, I looked at the organizations that I founded, I looked at all the other organizations and actions that happening in the Israeli society and in the Jewish society, and behind many of those activities, you see people that learned in the institutions of the Religious Zionist group and came from these ideologies and ideas. Wherever you look, when you look on the Temple Mount, like Yehuda, I'm sure he owes a lot of his activities from where he grew up and how he became. And when you look at in the army, like Elazar, when you look wherever you look, you see people that are acting. Some with them I will agree on more things, some of them I will disagree. But the power, what drives them, is the education that they got in the institutions, in the society, in the ideology that is Am Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, and Torat Yisrael. And this ideology needs someone that will be the political arm of this ideology, that will make this wonderful ideology be heard in the Israeli legislator Knesset. And that's our reason of existence. That's why we're presenting. As Rav Druckmann said just last week, there are many religious Zionists in many other parties, but there is only one party with the party is Religious Zionist, that this is the commitment to itself, to its voters, and to the generations that were and the generations that will follow. And that's the reason to vote for us, and this is our reason of existence.
Thank you very much, Simcha, for clarifying that. We move on to Elazar Stern, a member of parliament for Yesh Atid, and a person, as we know, with an incredibly distinguished military career, fulfilling many leadership positions in the IDF, Major General, head of the Manpower Directorate, the head of Badechad, training the future officers of the State of Israel, and currently a member of parliament for Yesh Atid. Elazar Stern, why, in your opinion, should religious Zionists vote specifically for Yesh Atid? You're on mute. To unmute yourself.
Doron,
Okay.
thank you, and thank for all the audience having me here. There is a maybe short answer to your question, because unfortunately I found myself maybe the only one who really represent the values of the Mizrachi or the Religious Zionist movement, where I'm very proud to say that I grew up, and my children and my grandchildren, all of them, still under this movement. I grew up in Shikun Hapoel HaMizrachi in Tel Aviv, where Bnei Akiva, Yeshivat Netiv Meir, and build a new settlement in Israel. Maybe it was my mistake to build it in the Galilee and not in Yehuda and Shomron. Otherwise, maybe I can be, to enjoy more in unfortunately, our community. I am very proud to feel all the years in the army, and I can tell you, I've never seen myself as a career officer. But from time to time, I look around me, and I was maybe the only one to wear kippah in this unit, in the paratroopers. And then I decided go out for the army and then come back, go out and come back, because I really think that the value of the religious Zionist movement, they are very important to the existence of Israel as a Jewish state. And I really believe that once you want to preserve the Jewish identity, beside the democratic identity, you should be to listen much more to the average Israeli. Because, you know, you can think like the religious Zionist new parties, which I don't enjoy the name, unfortunately, like they stole the name from all of us. They called it מפלגת הציונות הדתית, which is bull. I'm very sad to say or to use this word. Each one of us consider and proud to be religious Zionist and not pretend ourselves to be the religious Zionist party. And I think as Ne'eman, as the Professor Ne'eman, for example, built Ne'eman committee in conversion, he made a compromise with every streams in the religious, in the Jewish world. Arav Meidan and Professor Gabizon understood that in order to live together, to preserve the Jewish identity, or Israel as a Jewish state, you must make a compromise. And if you prefer the Rambam definition, Shvil HaZahav, the golden path. Look at everything that we are in Yesh Atid have done, or at least suggested. So I think the army initiate Nativ Plus. Till now, more than 14,000 soldiers already converted there. And when the Beit Hardali or Beit Yehudi or Tzionut Datit canceled the bill, which was all of them, all the Beit Din, Orthodox rabbi, now we force the court to make this decision. And you can look, and when Gabizon Midan said about compromise, that we will have a restaurant in Shabbat, for example, but not canyons or all the shops open, and we decided not to accept it. Now you can only dream to close all the shops in Israel, all the malls. Why? Because we don't know how to decide. We think that once we have the power, we will use the power till the end, to the most extreme point. And if you ask me, what is the biggest mistake? It's that to take or to be concentrate about every new settlement in Yehuda and Shomron and sacrifice it to the Jewish identity of, you know, to the reason, to give every Israeli the reason to be proud of define himself as a Jew. You know, this is the reason for me to be there. This is the reason for me to be not in religious party, but force or each one of in Yesh Atid to make a compromise in order to live together. So thank you for having me here. Maybe I'm a little bit strange here, but you know, you can judge me not only what's the name of the party, but what's the activities that we all of us together, we have done in order to enhance Israel as a Jewish state. Thank you.
Thank you, Elazar. Of course, you know, that's why there are different views, and that's why we're having this forum, because people who are the best of the sons and daughters of the religious Zionist community and represent the community are in different parties and have different views. It's now time to move on to Member of Parliament Ayelet Shaked, representing the Yamina party. Ayelet has been a Member of Parliament for many years, the previous Minister of Justice, making a big difference in the Justice Department. And we thank you very much for joining us, Ayelet. And the first question for you that all the participants have had a chance to answer until now is as follows. Why is it that somebody from the religious Zionist community in Israel should vote for Yamina? Ayelet.
Actually, the home of the religious Zionist is Yamina. We are a party that represents both all the people from the religious Zionist society. You know, it's a big spectrum. It's not just one stream, there are different streams. And in Yamina, we represent all the stream of the religious Zionists. We represent the values of the religious Zionist society, like Jewish identity, strong education, Eretz Israel, living in Judea and Samaria, strength the Yeshvut in Judea and Samaria. And we have also results. You know, when I was the Minister of Justice, Bent was the Minister of Defense, we did things in order to strengthen those values. So other parties can speak and talk, but in reality, we are the ones that show results. And, you know, we believe that the religious Zionists can be both part of the leadership of the country and keep the values that are important to us. So I think, you know, in Yamina there is many good and decent representative of the religious Zionist society, like Naftali Bennett, Matan Kahana, Alon Davidi, Idit Silman, Nir Orbach, Shai Maimon. It's a great team that represent all the different streams in this society, and I think that, you know, Yamina is the home.
So the next question, you know, this last week was the end of Adar. It's the 119th anniversary since the founding of Mizrachi, the Merkaz Ruchani of Rav Reimus, 1902, which really forged a path of partnership with the Zionist enterprise. The vision of Rav Reimus and the founding fathers of the Mizrachi movement was that if something significant was going to happen, of course, to bring Jews back to the land of Israel, even if not all parts of it were exactly according to the ideal Torah perspective and Torah ideology, it must be something that religious Jews partner with. And essentially, Mizrachi forged a partnership with the Zionist endeavor in the early years, and then, of course, with the State of Israel, and since then has been an integral partner in building Israel. Of course, there were times when there was only one party where all religious Zionists were part of, and things in Israeli politics have changed. And we really want to ask each one of you briefly, and I'll start, in fact, I'll go back to you, Dani, and we'll start back with you. You've waited for quite a while, and I'll just go, how do you see the future of religious Zionism in Israeli politics? How do you see things playing out in the next number of years in Israeli politics? Just for a few minutes for each of you, and then I'm going to give you a chance to respond. Dani, thank you.
I hope very much that religious Zionists with their values are really badly needed in this country to improve the way we are marching, the path we are going through. Will be prevalent in many political parties. I must admit that I'm praying to see the day in which we will have a prime minister that comes from Mizrachi political affiliation, but I also praying, for instance, that we will have a prime minister that comes from a Mizrachi ethnicity, pun intended. There are many needs that we have to make sure that this country, its entire population, sees itself not as sectarian. I wouldn't like the Mizrachi the political Mizrachi prime minister of Israel come from a secluded religious party. And I wouldn't like the Mizrachi, ethnically Mizrachi prime minister that I hope we will have come from a secluded Sephardi or Mizrachi political party. What we need these days is the contrary. We need religious Zionists influencing in all political parties. You know, as I said already, I moved from Tel Aviv to Shomron more than 30 years ago during the first Intifada. And there is no doubt that the settlement movement, the issue of Yehuda Shomron, was led by religious Zionists mainly. Thank God that they didn't see it as a sectarian movement. They brought with them all sectors of the Israeli population, to the point that today the population of Yehuda Shomron is roughly three equal thirds. Only one of them, of those 3/3 are the religious Zionists that, no doubt, you see, they say it clearly and plainly, they led the movement, but they brought with him 1/3 of less observant Jews and 1/3 of more Haredi Jews. So the point is not, it will be a tragedy if the religious Zionism politically concentrates in only in lowering the tuition for religious schools or in building mikvaot only as the first priority. The priority should be to blend with Am Israel and influence them, exactly like the Garinim Toranim that go to towns and cities in Israel to influence the entire population. If they would have been secluded in a closed gates religious community, they wouldn't be able to have that much as an influence, spiritual and otherwise. That's the way I hope religious Zionism will walk in the coming years, in the coming decades. The state of Israel needs it. They need them everywhere, in every party, and through those parties in the highest leadership positions.
Thank you, Dani. Yehuda, how do you see the future of religious Zionism playing out in Israeli politics in the coming years?
Thank you so much once again, Rav Doron and Dani and all the other speakers. It really is, I can identify very strongly with what Dani just said. Today, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, we mark not only the beginning of the redemption from Eretz Mitzrayim, but yesterday we also read that the Rosh Chodesh Nisan was the day of the establishment of the Mishkan, which united us all, the Geulah, the redemption from Egypt, which was the beginning of the process of Am Yisrael becoming a one nation. I think the same thing has to do with the people of Israel today. The religious Zionism, which if Dani said before that his religion is Zionism, I can say that my religion is Zionistic and my Zionism is religious. And I can say that I do hope that the religious Zionism that we can come from is a religious Zionism that unites. I don't know about Prime Minister, but I have a very warm recommendation that everybody here can agree on for Israel's next president. I have a wonderful candidate from the religious Zionism, who's also, by the way, an Anglo, and he's really a person who knows how to unite. But I think that really religious Zionism, if it is stuck in a marginal party, dealing as just another party, dealing with its own interests, will loses out on its ability to have an influence on the whole process of Am Yisrael coming back to Eretz Yisrael, on Aliyah, on settlements, on chinuch, education, on prospering of the kalkala, the economy of Israel. We need all of this based on values that are based on the Tanakh, that I believe that religious Zionism has a major role and should not go back to a point where it only represents a small section of Am Yisrael, but it really should be able to unite and be inclusive to all the different parts of Am Yisrael.
Thank you, Rabbi Yehuda. Simcha, over to you. How do you see the future of religious Zionism in Israeli politics?
Okay, so I think that as we mentioned before, I think there is, of course, room and need for religious Zionist people to be in everywhere, every place, and also because some of the there are differences that can find themselves a little bit hard to settle in one party. So it's a good idea that we have people from religious Zionist families and backgrounds in many parties, especially parties that think that they need to be, if someone wants to be a prime minister, he needs to be in a party that talks to the widest possible audience. So of course, for that matter, for leadership of the state of Israel, as a general, yes, it's excellent that people from religious Zionist origin goes and join other parties. But according to the polls that I think we published 2 or 3 weeks ago, the majority, even from the religious Zionist community, that most of the people that are religious Zionists do not vote to a party that is a religious Zionist by definition. But they almost all of them, almost 90% think that it's very important that there will be this kind of party in the Knesset. So as usual, the religious Zionist public takes care of everyone else and sometimes forget to take care of himself. That's part of our DNA as a public. We do it in many other ways, but it's not such a good idea. We need to have, if you want a religious Zionist party that will be able, so our public, our society, our group will be able to push forward the values that are actually, it's not, there is no such a thing as the religious Zionist values per se. There are values of a Jewish state that the religious Zionist group in the population are exercising, believing, pushing forward in all the aspects of their life, in education, in society, in welfare, and in politics. And if we want a religious Zionist party to be, and the majority of the public does want that, we need to vote for it. It doesn't work just, okay, someone else will do it. No one will take care of the yeshivot. No one will take care of Bnei Akiva. No one. Because they have other good priorities. I'm not saying that the priorities are bad, but you need to have someone who has your interest in its mind and it's his priorities, and that's the reason for there is always gonna be a need for a religious Zionist party.
Thank you, Simcha. Elazar, we come back to you just for a few minutes. How do you see the future playing out of religious Zionism in Israeli politics in the coming years? Elazar.
I think that our main challenge is, as even Yosef Brooke said, to be the bridge between Judaism and democracy, between the average Israeli to Judaism. Unfortunately, most of our friends now identified with the very extreme point of being rightist there. They can be there, but if they lost the main mission to take care about the Jewish identity of Israel as the Jewish state, so according to my personal belief, we lost our main mission. And I prefer that, for example, the issue of conversion, the issue of kashrut, the issue of Shabbat, it will not be issue between Israel Beitenu and the ultra-Orthodox. It should be under the spirit of the Mizrachi, under our way of education. And you know, I enjoyed myself being educated in religious Zionist institutions, you know, schools, yeshivot. But if in the same time we lost the other Judaism because we only took care about invest in our yeshivot tichoniot and in higher school and lost the investment in Jewish identity, the real Jewish identity, even if someone is not religious. You know, I think it's our biggest mistake. You know, when I was a Madrich Bnei Akiva, every time when I heard that someone Chazar b'tshuva, we opened the door to see that the Mashiach is not behind. When I established a Jewish courses in the IDF, which is army, there is no other army in the world which dealing with Jewish identity. I know that the only one way that I can preserve the Tzahal dealing with Jewish identity is not forcing everyone to לחזור בתשובה, to become a religious, because otherwise we are going to lose our right to invest in Jewish identity. And unfortunately, through this position, we lost the solidarity, not of us, of our friend. We took from them the reason to say, I am proud to be Jewish, even if I not believe even that Ribono Shel Olam is there. So I think that in the modern time, when being religious and being Jewish identity become more and more difficult, our mission become more and more complicated. And we should open our eyes, open our mind, and to see what is the right approach. You know, from one side, educate our kids in the religious Zionist movement, but in the same time, give the full right to every Jewish in Israel to preserve the Shabbat, not the Sunday. Keep the Shabbat way or in the meaning that he preferred to give to them. I think that our main mission, as I said before, is to bring back the solidarity, being a Jewish state. You know, I have one moment. Can I get another one moment? Okay.
Just a moment, yeah.
Okay, thanks. You know, I'm very involved in the Holocaust issues. You know, in the army, I established the Witnesses in Uniform, which till now there is more than 250 flights. I chair the Holocaust, the Institution for Holocaust Welfare when I went out, and I still in the Knesset the same. If I want to summarize, what is the two main principles, pillars that we were educated in my private home? One is that to ensure that forever the Jewish people will have a Jewish state independence, if you want to say never again. My mother brought it from Auschwitz-Birkenau, 21 Celager. The other pillars is ever ensure that we will not make a differentiation among people. Doesn't matter the race, the region, the color, never make a differentiation. From where my mom brought it, from the same place. Auschwitz-Birkenau, 21 Celager. So I think that we have not to ask ourselves above the other. Never again, or everyone was born equal. Both of them together. And if you want, Israel in the same level, democracy and Jewish state. And this is our main mission, according to my belief. Toda.
Thank you. So, of course, we've seen the plethora of different views of how religious Zionists could vote within the tapestry of parties in Israel. We've seen how each one has made your case and how you see the future of religious Zionism. I'm going to give you just a few moments, each of you, to respond to each other. I'm going to go back to you, Dani. This is really the final major question, and then I'm going to give you a one-liner to sum up at the end. But to ask each of you, you don't have to respond to everything that's been said by the others, but I'm giving you, you've all heard the questions of the other. I'm giving you a chance to respond. How would you like to respond to any of the things that have been said by the members of the other members of the panel? Dani, Dayan, over to you. Your response.
Well, the fact that we have to blend, to have non-sectarian parties is not a technical thing, it's not something miscellaneous, is one of our core beliefs. And only in that way we will be able to make real changes in the Israeli society. Gideon Sa'ar, our candidate for prime minister, he was the person that, for instance, initiated the high school trips to Hebron, to Me'arat HaMachpelah. Unfortunately, his successor cancelled that plan, and I must admit, the successor of his successor, Naftali Bennett, did not resume it. I would say, nevertheless, a word about my friends in Yamina. I have a strong relationship with Naftali and Ayelet. I know them for more than 50 years. Probably the desire was also to blend, to form a party that is involved, that involves all sides of the Israeli society. Unfortunately, they also failed in that test. Even though if there are persons that do not go on a kippah, the party as such continues to be a sectarian party, and I regret that. I think that those of us that come mainly from the so-called Machane Leumi, in the legacy of Menachem Begin and Yitzhak Shamir, are those that are best equipped to represent the values, the national values of loyalty to Eretz Israel, and the cultural values of ne'emanut, of loyalty to the Jewish tradition.
Thank you, Dani, for that. Rabbi Yehuda, handing over to you, your opportunity to respond to any of the other panelists. B'chavod.
Yeah, I want to say that I heard very carefully when both Dani and Elazar spoke about unity and about the major role of the religious Zionism. And my two questions I really want to pose as a response to Elazar, I would say is, first of all, we had so many opportunities in the last 2 years to create a unity government. And unfortunately, again and again, your party, when it came to the day of test, always refused to be part of a unity government. So you can talk about unity and express your opinions, but when the time has come, when we come to day, you're not there. And same thing, I wanted to really to respond to all these people. Last day we heard terrible expressions by somebody who's considered a partner of yours, and I'm referring to Avigdor Lieberman, speaking with such hate, such division against the ultra-Orthodox, and I'm sure, Elazar, you know that with the Knesset we cooperated a lot together with issues that you mentioned, both in conversion and Shabbat and things, how we turn this. But how can a person who expresses so much hate be considered somebody who could connect to what religious Zionism all stands for? I know that you, Elazar, is a person of love and a person of Ahavat Yisrael. And how can you cooperate with a person who's spreading hate against others?
Thank you, Rabbi Yehuda, for that response. Handing over to you, Simcha. Opportunity to respond to the other panelists. B'chavod.
I have to say that the tragedy of recent elections and recent years in Israeli politics is the trial of people to make it about a person. It's either you are for a person, either you're against a person, instead of being about values. There are some people say, oh, when you talk about values, you're becoming an enemy because the other person does not believe in your values. But it's exactly the other way around. You can make a lot of decisions when people come and talk about values, about the opportunities to push them forward, and then you can make, believe it or not, even compromise it. So people say values and compromise are something that does not work together. I think that the Mizrachi and the Religious Zionist group as a group showed that you can try to be connecting things that look on the first look as opposites, you can connect them. And when everything became about a person, about hatred of the other, about I'm not sitting with this guy or sitting with that guy, that's where our politics went south. So we talk about the values, we talk about our program. Religious Zionist Party has a detailed program. Sadly, we didn't have the time to translate it all to English because it's very detailed and thorough, and that's a problem. But anyone who ever was in an institution, in an organization, in a child program, in Camp Moshava, Wild Rose, wherever you were, you know that the values do translate well to English and do translate back well to Hebrew, and you can do it. You can do it and push it forward. I really hope. And because we're talking about religious Zionist, I have to finish with a little bit of Dvar Torah. You will have, excuse me, and it will be short. 70-something years after the of the first Israeli kingdom, it was separated. It was separated by Yerovam ben Nevat, who built a new, and we had Yehudah in Israel. And this strategy is, we are with it for more than almost 3,000 years now. We are with this strategy. And when he was doing his the state of Israel, the first state of Israel apart, the Gemara says that the Kadosh Baruch Hu told him, Chazor b'cha, regret, come back, and we will go together in Gan Eden, you, me, and David ben Ishai. And he asked, who will be the head? Who will be the prime minister? And he told him, the prime minister will be ben Ishai, will be David. He says, if that's the case, count me out. In 2 weeks, we can actually be in the equivalent of a political Gan Eden. We can have a coalition of almost 70 to 80 Knesset members that are committed, which one more, which one less, to the values of the Am Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, Torah Yisrael, in all different versions. And what blocks us is the question, who will be the head? So we are the only party that say 100% right-wing government. We know the numbers. We know who's going to be the prime minister probably, if that what will happen. It's probably going to be Benjamin Netanyahu. We're not going to lie about it. We're not going to hide it. But the question is not who will be the prime minister. The question is what will be the values and the make of this coalition. Because he was prime minister in many different governments. The making of the coalition is more important than the prime minister. And we can be 100% right-wing government if people will put the hatred and the personal issues aside and look at values. That's the promise that we make to our voters. We hope that anyone in every party will join us.
Thank you, Simcha. I hand over to you, Elazar. Briefly, an opportunity to respond to any of the speakers who've spoken.
Okay, maybe I only have to mention my friend Yehuda Glick, that I'm not with Lieberman party, and I also didn't enjoy his not yesterday as he didn't. The same level, maybe even more. And when he asked me about he and also Simcha about unity government, I think that we try to bypass in this conversation, very important conversation, another few ethics, settlement, Shabbat, conversion. Yeah, it's all written in our Torah. But in addition, maybe there is something about honesty, or not to cheat each other. When you sign an agreement, you have to respect it, that a word is a drop and corruption is corruption. Unfortunately, we lost everything like that, and only one will be very, very righteous. And if he's there, he can cheat. He doesn't have to respect his signature, doesn't have to respect the agreement that he signed, and no one, unfortunately, even hope from the Prime Minister to be honest, where we are. Toda.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to give you all one line. One line. This is your opportunity to, as politicians and leaders, to be as brief as possible. Literally one line to summarize, to cull your message into one sound bite. So if you can go, each one of you. Dani, give us one line. Why Religious Zionists should vote for you. One line.
I do believe that New Hope and Gideon Sa'ar as its candidate for Prime Minister encapsulates the combination of that we need for the future of the State of Israel, and strong leadership, political skills, and deeply rooted commitment to Jewish values. I know Gideon Sa'ar for more than 30 years, since he was a teenager. I count on him completely that he will lead Israel in the right direction, in the Jewish direction.
Thank you. Rabbi Yehudah, give us your one-line elevator speech.
I will conclude briefly, but through the Torah we mentioned before. At the end of the Torah yesterday, it talks about the establishment of the Mishkan on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and it always, everything Moshe did, it says, as Kasher Tzivah Adonai et Moshe, as Hashem told him. Every one of the vessels, every one of the parts of the Mishkan, everything it says, Kasher Tzivah Adonai et Moshe, Kasher Tzivah Adonai et Moshe. Only the last one, Vayakem et HaChatzer, he established the courtyard. And he finished, but it doesn't say that he did it as Hashem told him. And the reason is because the divine presence of Hashem, of the Mishkan, is from Hashem. What happens in the courtyard is from us. It's Am Yisrael. Hashem is not here to coerce us, to force us. We have to design what our Am Yisrael is going to look like when we face Hashem. And the most important thing in my eyes is if we can cooperate, and every different tribes can work together in unity for the sake of Eretz Yisrael, Am Yisrael, and Torah Yisrael.
Thank you, Rabbi Yehudah. Simcha, one line.
One line. Okay. The easiest line will be Am Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, Torah Yisrael. That's the religious Zionism. That's the religious Zionism party. But because Dani took a longer line, I will add a little bit to my line also. And don't have a system of direct elections in Israel. We don't. We vote for a party. We don't have our congressman or our representative in the Knesset personally. But I think that Bezalel Smotrich, and I hope to be like him. We will try to be the congressman or the representative or the constituency of everything that is religious Zionism, and especially religious Zionism from Aliyah and English-speaking countries, because of the background I mentioned in my first introduction. And that's, I think that's what we as a tzibur, we as a public, as a society, as a public, we want that. We need that.
Thank you. Elazar, your final mishpat. Why vote for Yesh Atid? Your final
the same length, in the same length. Okay. You know, we are before Pesach. And when we toasted in the army for Pesach, and 2 weeks later for Yom HaAtzmaut, I asked myself, why do we need 2 Independence Day? One is Pesach, one is Yom HaAtzmaut. And the answer is because we didn't succeeded to preserve one Independence Day, which is Pesach, so we had to have a second Independence Day, which is Yom HaAtzmaut. But meanwhile, we have to look at what is within between, the Holocaust Day. So we have to put our eyes always, you know, that we have history, that we must preserve our unity, and from time to time, to know that before the Independence Day, we have the Memorial Day, that in order to preserve our Independence Day, first of all, we have to be unity, but in the same time, to be ready to pay the price. We wish that we will not have to pay it again, but if we will, that we are there to defend the Jewish people all over the world. Toda ופסח שמח לכולם.
Thank you. I just want to say one concluding word for all of you. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been enlightening. And just maybe 2 or 3 final thoughts. What is so heartwarming is that all of you speak about Am Yisrael, Israel, Israel. That's what unites everyone along the religious Zionist spectrum. It's those principles which are, of course, at the heart of the founding of Mizrachi 119 years ago. And even though we see different parties emphasizing different things, the core values remain the same. And I think it's inspired all of us and confused all of us. Some of you have emphasized the need for a religious Zionist party, that it's only through a party with clear religious Zionist values and a party representation is the best way that religious Zionism can be represented. Others of you have said, no, it's specifically going beyond the religious Zionist sector and engaging in a broader swath of Jews across Israel. That is the religious Zionist mission. Others of you have emphasized the bridge, that the core of religious Zionism is to be a bridge in society and to worry not only about our own sector, but also about the Jewish identity of the state of Israel. And all of you are correct. All are needed. Each one emphasizes something of the tapestry of the values of Am Yisrael, Israel, and how they translate into Israeli politics. We wish each and every one of you Batzlacha Rabbah. We hope that this has been an inspiring time for all of those listening. Batzlacha Rabbah. And please God, as many of you have said, may there be more unity and a way forward of ensuring that these values have the biggest impact that they can, and we come forward together as a more unified people towards the march of Jewish history forward, deepening our Jewish and Zionist mission and identity. Thank you all so much for joining us, and we hope it was informative. Batzlacha.